Bing bongy bong, bing bongy bong. This is Joe, the bearded historian. He'll tell you an interesting story. Be careful of his soldiers, they can be brats. This is Angel, she's an entity. She'll cause chaos and plant her hands at you. This is Sue, she likes spirits, not the alcohol. She's the reason this channel exists. This is David, he likes fire trucks. He's here occasionally. Bing bongy bong, bing bongy bong, bing bongy bong. We preserve his story.
Alright, welcome to Friday, the second part of the history conference. Which reminds me, I need to fix that first part. Anyway, this one's a little bit about old schools. A little bit disappointing because we were hoping for more information about such schools, but there are some fun stories, so enjoy those. Before that, we've got a race. I decided to do Minecraft because, well, school kids play it. That's my logic, sort of. Ready? Here we go. Shout out time. Here's a shout out just for you. You support me, so I support you. The shout out is for our friends. Let's see who it is today. And there we go. Alright, then we got She Stole, there's Hillbilly, there's Nacho Daily, there's GOP3, there's Scrapping, there's Mountain Inspiration, there's Cruise Nuts, let's see, there's Jocelyn, there's Strong Mind, Sylvia, Days Adventures, Susan, Jacob, Voice, Steph, Steve and Tina, Sheena, Jason, there's Voice, there's Mark, there's Sea Tripping, there's Travis, let's see who else we got here, there's Duo, Jamaican American, there's my Linda, there's Zoel, with Carol. It looks like it's going to be Miss Carol. Hold on a minute. Alright. There we go. Okay, so we got She Stole, there's Sea Tripping, there's Cabler, there's Carnival, there's Tina, there's M and J, there's Rowdy, there's Jocelyn, there's Vaughn, let's see, there's Tammy, there's Susan, there's Faces, Mark's Garden, Mountain Inspiration, there's Trip, there's Brick Girls, Hiking Ontario, M&J, Travis, Mike's Garden, Glitter, Zol, Vacan, Brittany, Big Ben, Hillbilly's currently in the lead, there's G&G, there's Demi, there's Capina, let's see here, there's Jacob, there's there's Sylvia, there's Alice, it's She Stole, hold on a minute, and Mario. Alright, so this is Miss She Stole, who, well, last posted on Father's Day, and she does kind of a random channel. She does book reviews, art, all kinds of things. Recently she's been doing, I guess these are artists that she's covered. Recently she's been doing different kinds of artists. But if we go down here, she's got all kinds of things. She's got some religious things, all kinds of things. So very mixed channel. Right now she's supporting different artists, which is cool. And occasionally has a live, so check her out. Like, your comment, how good.
Round of applause for Herbal Chrome. Not very good with microphones. Is this a good spot? Okay. Rick told me he'd be an easy act to follow. I forgot about that. My source on this is mostly In the Shadow of the Butte book, and a little bit off the web, and some stories my dad told me. So that's my claim to accuracy there. So, going back to the railroad thing briefly. Most everybody here is aware of the Anglo-American Cattle Company. They had their headquarters here in Oelrichs. And the reason they located here, the biggest reason, even though it was not central to the location of their ranch, was the railroad was here in Oelrichs. They had their feed yards and their packing house and all that here because they had the railroad to ship the beef out. So, getting started, I'm almost exclusively on the country schools. People started to come into this country in the late 1800s and through about 1910, lots of homesteaders, so there were a lot of people. The population of Oelrichs area was about 3,000 people at that time, so that also meant there was a lot of kids. And they would come in and get their claim on 160 acres, and of course after a few years they kind of realized 160 wasn't enough to make it work in this country, but the influx of that many people created a need for a lot of country schools. The early buildings for the country schools were quite often just abandoned plain shacks. They would update them a little bit to make them a little more conducive to education, but for the most part they just kind of were a shack that they put together. Several of them had stables for the horses that the kids would ride to school. The teacher's salary in 1897 was $30 a month. During the Great Depression, of course, which was after they started to kind of go away, the salaries were lowered by 11.34%. Oftentimes, the teacher would live in the home of one of the students, one of the families. They would, of course, play room and board. In the more affluent school districts, they would include a room in the schoolhouse for the teacher to live in. It was not unusual to move the school buildings to be in better proximity for the students, and of course, you know, they were just shacks kind of built on top of the ground, most of them, and they would put them on skids and move them a mile or 3 or 4 or whatever, probably with horses, and get them to a better location so the kids didn't have to go quite so far. So financing the schools to get that $30 a month, the country was surveyed in the 1880s, 1890s along there, and of course a township is 36 square miles, and they designated section 21 as what they call the school section. And money off that school section, either by rent or from sale, went to pay the expenses of running the school. There were 6 rural townships, some larger than the 6 mile squares. Harmony number 23 was a half a township, and Harmony number 16 was double. In other words, 72 square miles. Here in Oelrichs, there was the very smallest one. It was called Banner number 9. It was 4 square miles. Some of the other school districts were Lithia number 5, Dryden number 19, Oelrichs number 4, Union number 7. The country schools were named either by location or a prominent family in the area. I've got quite a list of those names, and I'll read them off. Some of them might be familiar. There was Lithia, Hountain, Lancaster, Dry Creek, Bunker Hill, Dryden, Cowboy Peak, Moody, Windy Hill, Pettigrew, Thompson, Groats, Pleasant Hill, and Pleasant Ridge. All total, That's just a partial list. All total, there were 31 different country schools operating at one time in the area. In the early days, they had 2 3-month terms for the schools, a spring session and a fall session. In the winter, the weather was just too bad to get the kids out to travel however far they had to go to school. And in the summer, they were needed for the ranch work. It was pretty common. The last few schools to remain operational were Thompson, Pleasant Hill, Windy School, and Pettigrew. This all kind of ended in the late 1960s. They pretty much closed down then, and everyone came into Oelrichs or went over to Edgemont, wherever, or up to Hot Springs, wherever it went. So basically, that's all I have. I was going to ask, is there anyone here who attended a country school? I really don't have any personal stories. Would you mind coming up and telling about your experiences at the country school? I was a town kid. I never went to country school. I knew several people who did.
I'm Connie Larvey. I'm from Wagner, South Dakota. For my kindergarten through 8th grade, I was at Lawrence 52. 8th grade, so kindergarten, well, I guess it's 9. Kindergarten, 1st grade, and usually just 2 or 3 in each class. So it was divided in reading, arithmetic, so each one went up to the teacher and had their lesson by her desk. Well, for 8 years, you heard the whole program. By the time you were in the 8th grade, grades were pretty easy by then because you had heard it all except for
Once or twice.
Once or twice or a few times. But yeah, most of my family went there. And there was 13 of us kids growing up. No running water. There was 2 outhouses. The board would pay the one family to bring in water. That was their job every morning, to bring in fresh water. We had the old scoop, so you had to, after recess, you'd come in, everybody's thirsty. Whoever got the scoop first got the first drink, and then it just went like that. There was no watching to make sure everybody had their own cup. That wasn't a thing. At one point, one of the teachers, I remember Miss Knox, when you said that they would have a room for them to sleep. There was no room for her to sleep, but we knew that because she lived in Fairfax, which was probably about 30, 40 miles away. So we knew she stayed there. It was like a little, she spent the night type of thing. But, what else can I tell you? The school was used as our voting precinct at the time, so that was always cool with us. We'd get off school if there was voting going on. That was nice. Very seldom did we miss school because of weather, but yeah, there was times when you just knew that you weren't going to get up the hill to get to the school. And it was just the regional families around there. And back in, I went to school from probably 61, and I started high school in 1970. So there's a lot of families with quite a few kids at that time. But not all 13 of us were in school at the same time. I mean, we were all spread out. Any questions?
How far was the school from your house?
It was 4 miles, and Mom and Dad would get us to school, but there was times when we had to walk, and usually it was only like 2 miles, 2.5 miles before we got picked up and brought home. So, no horses though. No, we didn't have any more. Nothing about that.
How many students were in your school? Approximate.
Well, usually the most in one was 3. So it was 2 times, what, 2 times 8, 16 of us? I think, no, there was one that had just one kid that was in his grade, but the rest was always 2, paired up with 2, and one was 3. So we're kind of even out, about like 16.
Wow.
Did they merge the school with another school, or did they just close it?
They just closed it, and then we all went to Wagner, and then we that's when the busing started. And
Very good, thank you.
Is there any more? Anybody else would like to share a story?
I'm Connie Allmer, and I attended what they call the women's school. All my brothers and sisters, as far as I know, attended it too. But when my older brothers and sisters were going, they had a lot of problems with snakes around the schoolhouse, and they finally discovered they were setting in a rattlesnake den. So when one of my sisters' school was let out for the summer on a Friday, and on Sunday a tornado blew the schoolhouse away.
Oh no.
So they didn't want to put another school in that area, so my dad donated a small area for me to put a schoolhouse on. So I was lucky, and we had to walk about a quarter of a mile to school, but the rest of them all had to go only a mile and a half to where it was sitting in the rattlesnake den. I could tell you an interesting story about one of the teachers, but I don't think I better right here. Okay. The kids were out for recess, and the teacher had come out to go to the fancy restroom, and all of a sudden the door flew open and she come out with her panties down around her ankles.
Oh no!
The kid says, "Go get the closest neighbor to come shoot the snake down this tunnel."
Oh no.
So the 2 oldest kids, one of which was my sister, run up to the neighbors, and he came with a shotgun. Well, you can imagine what happened when he
Oh
put the
no.
barrel around the snake. They had some pretty interesting tales to tell. So, I went all 8 grades to the London school after they put the school closer to our house. And then I went on to Hot Springs to high school.
You know, they always say confession is good for the soul. You know, and young people today think they're coming up with original pranks. Everything's been done before. So that's all I have. And here's Roy again.